Welcome to Book and Lounge. I'm your host, Jacqueline. Today we are joined by a special guest, Lauri Kubuitsile, a Botswana-based writer whose work spans children's books, adult fiction, crime, and literary novels. She's the author of more than 30 books for younger readers, several acclaimed novels for adults, and a short story collection. And her work is taught across schools in Southern Africa. Today we will be discussing The Scattering, her historical novel, which will be published in the UK next month. The book has brought her international attention for its compassionate portrayal of two women caught up in the colonial wars in early 20th century Southern Africa. It's a book about friendship, displacement, loss, and the ways communities carry one another. So Lauri, welcome to Book and Lounge. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Finally, we managed to get a time that works for both of us. So thank you so much for sparing the time. So we're here to discuss your book, The Scattering. It's due to be published in the UK next month. However, before we get into the conversation about the book, I just thought it would be nice just to ask you some questions about yourself so that listeners can get to know you.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll start off with some quick fire questions. And the first one is, what's your favorite drink or snack when writing?
I'm a little bit boring. I really don't eat when I'm writing. I drink water. Yeah.
Water's good for you. So that's, that is a drink. So it works. And also, are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm kind of I come from a working class background. I'm very used to, if you're a worthwhile person, you must work, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So that's sort of my writing life. I've always been a bit strict about getting to the office, staying here. I don't work in the nights. I don't work weekends, but I just sort of work normal office hours. Although lately it's getting later and later. I might get to the office at about 11 and maybe knock off about 6 or 7. But yeah.
And so you just write continuously for the whole day?
Well, I normally start with admin things. There's always a lot of admin. I have quite a few books and emails to answer and just kind of things. So I usually start with admin and then I'll do some submissions. I have novels that are unpublished. I have short stories that I try to keep out there. And then I usually start writing actually quite late in the day. If on the project I'm working on, maybe I'll start writing about 1 and then, try to stick to it until about 6 if I can.
And do you just, when you start writing, does it just start flowing, or do you have times where you kind of have, what do you call it, writer's block, where you have to struggle to actually get into the flow?
Yeah, I mean, I am someone who believes that you should write. Like you can write out of writer's block. So sometimes I'll just keep writing, even though I know what I'm writing is quite horrible. But then the next day, whenever I come to the project I'm working on, I'll go back and look at what I did the day before. So I slowly, I start with a bit of editing and rewriting of what I did yesterday, and then write new things as far as I can go. So, and I'm especially right now, the book I'm working on right now, I'm working on the rough draft. Normally, I have a bit of an outline. This book I don't, which is unusual. But if I have an outline, I can write pretty fast if I've thought clearly about the rough draft and I've done my research and other things. And I don't mind about the quality. I always tell people that if I'm in the middle of a rough draft, I will not die, because I can't die with that terrible thing on my laptop. So, yeah. I'm not a perfectionist. I become a perfectionist on editing. I do a lot of editing, a lot of rounds of editing.
Okay. And when it comes to reading, are you a fiction, a non-fiction reader?
I read a lot of fiction, but I also love nonfiction time and again. I like memoirs a lot, and I like historical fiction. I just read an interesting historical fiction about a shipwreck in Australia. I'm not historical fiction, historical nonfiction. But yeah, I mostly read fiction. I love stories.
So do I. Just coming to where you're talking to me from at the moment. You're in Botswana, correct?
Yeah, I live in a large village here called Mahalapi. I've lived here most of my life.
Hmm. And what is the literacy scene like in Botswana?
The literature or the literacy of the people? Because we have quite a
Uh,
high literacy rate.
I meant the literary scene. Do you have lots of writers events?
Aish, we don't have much going on. I'll be very honest. We have a writers' association. I was at one point the vice chair. We used to have a book fair in Gaborone, but I'm not sure it's still running. Uh,
Hmm.
we're a small population. We have less than 3 million people, and there's a lot of, it's a developing country. There's a lot of things that need to take sort of priority to the arts. But I mean, we do have writers. We have some very good writers, especially women writers like Sherilyn Toomey, although she's Ghanaian, but we call her a Mozwana because she grew up here. And people like Bessie Head, who also the South
Hmm.
Africans tried to steal, but she lived here not far from where I live. And Wami Molefi. We have a few very important writers, but yeah, it's not big. There's not a lot going on.
Uh-huh. So for the book club, we kind of normally try and get like writers that cover the span of the African continent, and most of the time we struggle when it comes to Southern Africa. I think mainly because we don't really know very many writers from there because the books don't tend to get published here. So when Jersey mentioned your book, and especially the topic that you were talking about, I was really excited to discover your
Oh,
writing because I
okay.
hadn't,
Thank you.
yeah, I didn't know of you until she mentioned you. So
Yeah.
it was great. It was a great conversation that day that she actually, we got to
Oh,
talking about you
nice.
and your book. So you're a full-time writer, but
Yes.
I read somewhere that before you took up writing, you were a science teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of writers are really focused people. I'm really a generalist. I've done a lot of things in my life because, like you say, I was a teacher, which I loved. I loved being a teacher, and I was a scientist before that. I mean, I was a
Oh,
toxicologist, and then for a little while, I owned a business. And even now, I mean, I'm a writer full time, but I also am a stained glass artist. I'm an actor. I'm part of a playback theater group. I like to do a lot of things, and especially now, I feel like when you do different creative things besides like me being a writer, they sort of feed each other because I'm also a musician. And so when you do other creative things, they sort of help your writing. But yeah, I'm
hmm.
a generalist in everything.
You're a true multi-potentialite. So I like to call people who do so many different things. When did you then transition from teaching and scientist to then just focusing mainly on writing? And what inspired the writing?
Really, I'm a lover of books. Writing is sort of incidental. I mean, it's like kind of like I wanted to be more involved in books than I already was as a reader. So, but to be honest, after being a teacher, I accidentally suddenly owned a newspaper. It's sort of a complicated story, but it involved a Zambian man who was a bit of a hustler. And suddenly I was owning a newspaper. And I was very naive about everything. I sort of am somebody who jumps into things not always knowledgeable, but I'm little bit lucky, and things normally work out. I don't die or so. Um, but for this one, okay, we had the newspaper, and then at one point we had to it was tabloid size, and we decided to reduce it so we could print it our own self. And it was a free paper, and I wanted to make. There was another newspaper similar to it, so I wanted our paper to be different. So I just naively thought, okay, I'll just buy a novel from somebody and like serialize it in the newspaper so that people will want to pick up the newspaper. And then I realized that's a very expensive thing to do, to buy the rights for a novel. So I just said, oh, I'll just write one. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I wrote, and I wrote it in the most ridiculous way. It was a detective story. and I had no plot, and I just wrote 1,000 words like on Thursday. My deadline was Friday. It was just insane. But anyway, so it finished, and then people, I'd been writing for the newspaper, to be honest. I wasn't completely not a writer. And then when it finished, people would come to the office and they'd be like, I missed part 21. So we would print out from the computer, they'd go away with part 21, or I missed part 11. So we kept doing this. And my manager said, you know what? This is like, we can't keep doing this. It's better you just contact a publisher and see if they'll make a book for you. And I didn't know anything about it. I was just blank. And I just looked in the, by then we had telephone directories. And so I'm just looking, I see Macmillan in Hibernia. So I just send them a letter and I send them the book and they published it. That was in 2005. And then I got like 200 pula or something in royalties, very small. I just kind of forgot about it. I had a few books in the office. So if people came, we could, give them a book. And then the book, after 5 years, it got chosen as a prescribed book in Botswana for junior secondary school. It was so shocking. And so then I was thinking, and by then because that book has 4 parts, they're novellas. There are 4 detective novellas. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll try this. And then I did. And then it's worked out.
Wow, you're a true
it's
born
crazy.
writer.
It's just crazy.
Because I find many people struggle to just get published, and whereas for you, you just kind of happens. For me, that's like the mark of someone who actually writes and writes well. Because I don't think a publisher would just, you send them the book and then they just publish.
Yeah, I think I was lucky. And I also feel like, in a way, it wasn't the best way to become a writer because I really sort of made a lot of mistakes publicly where I could have maybe made those mistakes here in my office and nobody would have seen them. So, yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky and I'm very grateful. Yeah.
And I noticed that you don't really limit yourself to a genre. Because you write for young people, you write for adults, and you also do short stories and detective and romance. Is there a genre that you haven't tried yet that you'd like to try?
I do, like I said, I'm a generalist, and I really just want to write what I want to write. I don't even care now. Sometimes I don't even care if it gets published, It's just the writing that's so interesting to me. I'm actually working on a really crazy, when I started writing, I thought I would be a humorous writer. And I wrote, I have one young adult book that's quite funny that was published in South Africa. And I don't know if you know about the Kane Prize. It's a prize. Yeah. I have my short story that was, I was shortlisted for the Kane Prize in 2011. I'm so bad with years. I'm sorry. I think it's 2011. And that story is also very funny. So I wanted to be like Sue Townsend. I don't know if you know, like the Adrian Mole books.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of Adrian Mole. But then I sort of failed, and I wrote all these other things in the meanwhile. But now I'm writing a really crazy, humorous novel, not even set in Botswana, it's set in America about the next presidential elections. I have no business writing this book, but I'm enjoying it.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it because anything about American presidential election is of interest at the moment. And
Yeah.
a humorous one would be good because at the moment we're not laughing very much.
We're not laughing. That's the thing.
So now that kind of brings me to the scattering. Before we dive into the origins and the themes of the book, I wonder if you could just tell listeners what the book is about.
Okay, the book is historical fiction, and I think I've sort of changed what I think it's about because I really think now it is more about 2 women going through 2 wars, and they're very different women, but they have very similar life stories. I mean, one is Tjipuka. She's a Herero woman who went through the German Herero War. And then there's a Afrikaner woman called Riette who was in the Second Anglo-Boer War. And they meet in Ngamiland in Botswana. And it's about their lives before they get there.
So you have mentioned the two characters, and although you have stories about the other characters like Ruhapo, and he features quite a bit in the book, the main focus is on Riette and Tjipuka. I really struggled with the names, by the way. I was like, am I
Tjipuka
pronouncing this
and
right?
Riette.
Riette.
Yeah.
I was saying Rita.
Uh-huh.
Riette. So
Names
yeah,
are
so
tough.
the Southern African names are. So anyhow, so you focus mainly on those two. I just really wanted to explore why you thought telling their stories, and specifically the stories of women, was important for you.
I'll be honest. Initially, I thought it would be about Ruhapu and Shipuka only.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the whole backstory of Riette, and she only came into the book at the end when everybody was in Ngami land now.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I do a rough draft quite quickly, and then I have many rounds of edits. And I had many people read this book because, to be honest, when I wrote the sketching, I was primarily writing, sort of light things, like detective, children's books, and I really felt I was really punching above my weight class, and so I wanted to make sure that I got things right. And so one reader, a Namibian, he read it and he said to me, he felt like what do you call it? Riette needed a bigger role. So I actually wrote Riette's chapters completely, besides the end part, separate from the rest
Mm-hmm.
of the book, and then put them inside. Once I put them inside, the book became different. And now, because I've been living with this book, I started writing this book in 2014. It was published by Penguin in 2016, so I've been living with it for a very long time. And in general, I think we can agree that the historical record, this is something that Hilary Mandel talked about in one of her lectures about her historical fiction, that there are holes in the historical record, and the historical record is written by the winners everywhere, you know. And so, I mean, you don't find Herero people in the historical record. It's as if they have nothing to say. They lived no life. You don't find women, as if women were not there. But I know women were there. They can leave all the holes that they want in that historical record, but I know women were there. And especially when it comes to war, I was thinking of things like when I started writing, I was thinking of Chimamanda Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun, and also Eminata Forna's Memory of Love. I really feel that sometimes, especially like with the genocide of the Herero people, you hear numbers, these huge numbers, and they feel so uh, sterilized, that I wanted a personal story, and I wanted it to be from women, because I feel like women, men are like, wars make them heroes, and they get statues, and they're the ones that everybody's focusing on. People know the guns and the formations of battles, but to be honest, I think all of us know women are doing the real work of war. Women are the ones who stay home and keep things going. Women are the ones who the men come back to, and the women have to heal them. Women are the ones who, take abuse for choices that they really didn't have any choice in. And so I just felt like we need these. I think historical fiction about women is like filling in those holes, or historical fiction about anybody who's not in the record. Historical fiction about Herero, about almost all African people. It's filling in those holes that need to be filled.
Mm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I just recently read, I think a book is called The Women, and it was set in during the Vietnam War, and
Hmm.
it was about the women who actually served in the war as nurses. But it's just really rare to find any record of the women that were in Vietnam. There's lots of books
Imagine.
and lots of films made about the American soldiers that were there, but very little about the women. And then when the women went back, they were still ignored because no one would believe that they had actually just returned from Vietnam.
Imagine.
Yeah, you are right. And what this book made me feel like is that war is a very senseless endeavor, and it's always the
Absolutely.
women who are picking up the pieces.
Yes,
Yeah, that
exactly.
really came through really loud and clear.
Women
Yeah.
also are never having the choice about war. You know,
Hmm.
the men choose the wars, and we are just the victims. I mean, women are raped, they're left to starve to death, to try to find food for children. It's just horrendous. It's such a failure of humanity.
Yeah, and the other thing that came through is that how really horrible we are as humans to each other. So
Yes.
that also came through really loud and clear in the book. I did want to come back to the history of the Herero people. Now,
Mm.
given us there's very little out there that's written about the mass extermination of the Herero people and the San and the Nama people, have you had any criticism about juxtaposing the Boer War alongside the killing of the Herero people? Have you had any criticism that it takes away from the story of the Herero people that is not told anyway by juxtaposing the two together?
No, I've had criticism, a lot of criticism about other things. For example,
Mhm,
people, there's this idea that only people from certain places should write certain things,
okay.
like, but no, not about putting those two women together. I
Mhm.
didn't, I haven't had that criticism. It might come in the UK, who knows? The book has been quite, yeah, I've had some difficult times, let's put it like that.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to that. Come back to that. And I was just curious what background research you did for the book, given us there's very little that is written about the German activity in Namibia and the region at the time. And also, what's written is generally written from, as you said earlier on, from the point of view of the victors, and also normally written much later on after the events. So, I just wondered what kind of research you did and how easy it was for you to find the material that you're looking for.
Yeah, it was hard. In fact, I was deciding to give up, to be honest. You know how this book started. I've said it many times, but my family camped in Namibia at the sea at Luderitz. And that Luderitz is actually, it used to be one of the concentration camps, but right now it's a campground, you know and I didn't, and where I live, Mahalapi, the royal family, Johannes Maharero, they settled here in Mahalapi. We have a whole ward and a school, and I know many Herero people. I even knew one of our chiefs in Mahalapi was, I think, maybe the great grandson to the one in the book. And I knew him. He was a customer for
Mhm.
my business when I had the newspaper. Anyway, so when I went to Cape Town Book Fair, and I met a woman there, a writer that I really loved, Jane Kachavivi. She wrote a beautiful memoir. She's Namibian. Her husband is an important Herero historian, and he's right now Speaker of Parliament there. So Jane said to me, I was talking to her about her memoir, and then she said to me, and I said, we love Namibia. We always go there. We go to Swakop for camping and Christmas time. But this time we went to Luderitz. And then she said to me, do you know what that place is? I said, no. And she told me. And I was really disgusted with myself. How do I live in Mahalapi with all the Baherero people that live here and Baherero that I know personally, and I don't know this history? So when I came home, I was just trying to educate myself as a citizen of Southern Africa. Like, we must know this history. And then a story sort of was starting to come to me, but I thought, I don't know, I can't do this. And then I tried to do some research and I was failing. I couldn't find anything. And
Mm.
then I went to Nairobi. I was invited to Story Moja. It's a literary festival in Nairobi. And I met a man there. It was just a random man. Like, you're on your panels, but then you attend other sessions. So I kept being at various sessions with this man. And then at one point he asked me, okay, so what are you writing now? And then I said to him, I'm sort of thinking about this thing, but I can't find, any research where to go. And just, it was like God intervened or something. This man just happened to be like a complete academic in that very area. And he gave me like names. Actually, most of the research on the Herero side I got from academic papers, which he gave me names of different people who have specialized in that history. And there's a very good book called Herero Heroes, which was very important. I went to archives. I even there's a Herero poem that was translated from Ochi Herero to English that I used to come up with the scene where the doves are above the well in the desert. Yeah. And so wherever I could get information, I got, but really primarily academic papers. And I researched for a long time. Maybe a year and a half, because, I wanted to know the pre-colonial history of the Herero and like how they lived, and sort of also like the interaction with the Nama people, because the Nama were their big enemies. And then what happened just before they decided to rise up against the Germans. And then also the war, of course, what happened in the desert, but also even what happened after the war. Although it's not in the book, I wanted to know. But also, even in Ngami land, again, I had to do a lot of research about, because the first Herero who came into Botswana, which is now Botswana, came running away from Kosi Maharero, from the chief, because Herero traditionally didn't have paramount chiefs. But a lot of these colonizers, it was much easier for them to have one boss guy they had to deal with instead of many. So they put Maharero, who was a flawed human, and he took a lot of people's land, he took people's cattle. And so the first group that came over into Botswana, they did in 1904, when the refugees were coming from the war, they didn't want them. They didn't want them to come to Ngami land. And so there was a lot of politics around the Tswana chief who was there. And so I did that research. And then, of course, Riette side was much easier, because the Afrikaner people, they really have recorded their history.
Yeah.
So that wasn't so bad. But I did research for a long time. Yeah.
Some of the scenes in the book were, as for me as a reader, really hard to read. At times, I had to put the book down, walk away, and then just kind of like decompress and just do something completely different, and then come back to the book. So I just wondered what the experience was for you writing these really harrowing events, and was there any particular scene that was really hard for you?
Yeah, and the crazy thing, as much as there's so much violence and sadness in the book, one of my readers was not happy I left a lot of things out. Because there's a horrible thing. There's a whole film about this, a documentary about the fact that when people died at the concentration camp, every morning the heads were cut off. But the real thing, what happens to me now, is when I have to read. I was in Germany, because it was translated into German. It's been published in Germany. And I was somewhere and I was reading about, because I have a grandson, and it was about one of the small boys dying. And I couldn't get through it. I burst in, I forgot. I picked that section and I didn't even think. I'd read it many times in other festivals, and I burst into tears. And I was so embarrassed, but it's hard. Yeah. When I was doing those scenes, I really tried to use really simple language, and to not glorify or drag it on in any way. Just to, this happened, because of, I know how difficult it is. It was difficult to write. It's got to be difficult to read.
And what was the reaction like in Germany?
I don't know. I was there when it first came out in Germany. I was there for the festival. And there are people who really read the book and like it. And my publisher had, I mean, the next year after, which was 2 years ago, I did like a tour. I always had people who really loved the book, you know, and of course they don't know that history. They really don't know that. I mean, even in Namibia, like when it first came out in 2016, like I said, Peter Kachavivi, he's a Herero historian. He really liked the book. And so we did the launch at the Parliament restaurant at the Parliament. And German Hereros, I mean, German Namibians, I mean, who are Namibian citizens but from German descent, they didn't know the history. I mean, it's really not talked about. And so sometimes it can be difficult. So I don't know. I can't really say. I mean, my publisher in Germany, she just keeps on saying, you know, this book is going to take time for people to accept. So maybe they will, maybe they won't.
Have you had a lot of feedback from the Herero in Namibia?
Yeah, that's what matters a lot to me. It really does. Even Herero in Botswana, we have a very large Herero population here. Like, for example, in Maun, in Ngami land, I did a launch there from the 20, you know, the Penguin edition of it. And the woman who was interviewing me, she's a poet. She's someone I've known for a long time, but she hadn't read the book. And she's Herero, but she's young. I think maybe she's in her 30s, maybe 40s now. She didn't know the history at all. And she was very thankful. Like now there's a new edition that came out in English in Namibia last year. And a man came, and it's common for Herero people to, like this man, he's a librarian. And he said, I recommend this book to all my relatives. They all need to read this book. And the funny thing, even just yesterday, a friend of mine was at an academic conference in South Africa, in Stellenbosch. And a Namibian woman, a Black Namibian woman, I don't think she's Herero though, but she's doing her PhD on the book. And, you know, my friend Tracy, we're good friends forever. She was just like, when she saw the sketching and the program, she thought, oh, it must be a different book. And then when the woman stood up with a copy of the book and started talking about my book, afterwards she went up to the woman and said, you know, the woman was just going on and on about the book because the conference was about gender and violence in literature. And this woman is doing her PhD on the genocide. And when Tracy told her that, I know this author, she's a good friend of mine. Oh my God. That woman has sent me so many photos. She said, I want to meet this author, you know. So really, even though, like I said, I often get, especially from white people, that you shouldn't have written this book. It was wrong for you to write it. You're not Herero, what. But Herero people, they're the ones who make me feel like it's good I wrote it. For me, I feel like I must write what I must write. That's just how it is. I must take the abuse if I must have abuse. That's just how it is. So, but yeah, no, very good. Like I said, I mean, in Namibia, I was invited to have the launch at Parliament because one of the most important historians in the country, the man who started the University of Namibia, he loves the book. Yeah, so that's all that matters to me. I don't need everybody to love the book.
And I don't think it really matters who writes the gaps that we have in history. I don't think it really matters as long as we're putting the stories there. And I, for one, I mean, I'm grateful that I've been educated. What I've found is that reading textbooks and watching documentaries about the events is not really the same as reading a novel, because the novel then makes it very personal. You're living that person's life, and then you can really tell the impact of the war on the women, on the children. You're much more empathetic. Kudos to you, you know, for staying strong, and also, you know, not paying attention to all the people who are criticizing you for writing it. I don't think it matters who actually writes the story as long as the story is put out there.
Mm. And I
And so,
agree with you 100% about the empathy.
mhm,
I mean, look at the Biafran War. I mean, half of Yellow Sun just made it so real for us.
mhm,
I love historical fiction because of that. It's very, even I was listening to Isabel Allende the other day on a podcast talking about her new book. And she was talking about that similar thing, especially about women missing in history and how we develop that empathy by individuals. It's too hard when they say, 100,000 people were killed. It's just
mhm.
too hard. You can't feel, it's just, you can't even imagine. But when they say, Tjipuka was killed, and this is Tjipuka's story, then you understand it as a human.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
it really brings it to life. Especially the horror of what happened. It was hard to read, but I'm very glad that I've read it. Coming back to reader, so you said you've received a lot of criticism. Has that surprised you? And has there been any reaction that has particularly stuck with you?
You know how it is. I mean, you can get 100 compliments and one insult, and the insult is the only thing you'll remember. I mean, I
It's
try
human
not to be
nature.
that person, but I think we all are that person. Yeah, I mean, it affected me, and I had to rethink, like, is this what I should be doing? Should I be writing these stories? I mean, the funny thing is, like I was saying, I was born in America. I came here in 1989, and I'm a citizen now only of Botswana. I don't have American passport anymore. This is my life. I've been here since my 20s. I'm now in my 60s. And so I don't know. What am I supposed to write? Like now I'm writing this book set in America. But to be quite frank, I feel this is the one that I am wrong to write
Hmm.
because I haven't known America. I haven't even visited. They won't give me visa, so I can't even visit. And so I don't know. I mean, yes, the criticism affected me. Yes, I did rethink a lot of things, but it didn't change me. I still feel
Hmm.
like as writers, we must write the story that comes to us. If it doesn't get
Hmm.
published, fair enough, you know. But if it gets published, then you must have to, you know, publishing and writing are completely different things. And
Hmm.
I love writing. I don't always love publishing. I don't always love getting out there, having my work out there. Like even yesterday when my friend was saying, "Oh my God, this lady in front of us is talking about your book," I said, "Please don't tell me."
Uh-huh.
Please don't tell me. But it was all good things, so I don't know. And she claims when I come to Stellenbosch, I'm going to get a free dinner, so that's also nice.
So then they're not liking the publishing bit. Is it because of the reactions and the comments that you might get, or is it the struggle to do the marketing, to publicize the book? What is it about the publishing that you don't particularly like?
The thing is, publishing is a business. And I think
Mhm.
writers, a lot of times, we like to hope that our art will not be destroyed in the process. So you have to submit to that situation. So as
Mhm.
soon as you get accepted, you have editing, which is not my favorite thing. I mean, I like good editors, but bad editors can really be frustrating. And then, yes, marketing is hard. Getting on stages can be hard, selling books, people telling you you only sold, 100 books, you feel like a loser. you know. So, yeah, it's hard. It's business and it's hard to put something that you really poured your heart into out there into the world because definitely not everyone is going to like it and that's just how it is and that's how it is for all writers, but you
Mhm.
just have to butch up and accept it.
So then, what do you hope a first-time reader takes away from the book? And is there any misreading of the book that you'd like to correct?
Um, I don't think there's any misreading I haven't heard. What I feel about the book is, I mean, when I set out, I have no agenda. But now when I think about it, I do want people to know about this history, especially that I think there's negotiations going on for reparations between the Germans and the Namibians, the Herero and the Nama people. So I think education is important for everybody. Not that that's why I wrote it, but I just want I just want the history to be out there. It's nice that I did write and it got published and people are going to read it. I also think when you write historical fiction, you get all the facts, you get all the background. And especially when it comes to these two women, you have to take a lot of leaps of faith based on you as a woman. And I think that empathy, I know I'm a woman. I know what it is if your child dies. I know what it is if I had to walk away from my child because I love them so much, I want to save them, you know? So to like, how can I say, pull us as people back in history. Like a lot of times history, when we think about it, in our thoughts, it's in black and white pictures, you know? And so it's very easy to think those people, but I want people to think of the history in colored photos. And I don't want people to think those people. I want people to think me, you know, because this is how it is. This is how it is. And this is how it is now. And this is how it is in the future. In the end, we're humans. And these things, you know, what would happen if it was you? You know, sometimes when I'm writing, I might be writing in third person, but when I'm so much in the story, it suddenly switches to I. And now, you know, the next day, like I said, I come back and look at what I wrote the day before. And then I find, oh, this is what happened now. And I think because me as a reader, that's what I love. I want to be I want to be in the book. You know, ever since I was a small child, I was in the book. Eh? And that's and it's important for history, and it's important for this history. Very important.
Looking back on the journey of writing the book, what moments would you say you're grateful for?
I mean, there's a lot of moments, I'll be honest. Like when I think of that librarian, I mean, I nearly cry when I think about him for how much he's thankful that I wrote the book. I don't even, sometimes I just tell myself, maybe I only wrote the book for him, and that's good enough. Like 100% good enough, you know? And the original book is dedicated to a friend of mine. She was adopted by an Afrikaans woman here, not far from here in Calamari, a small village. Her mother was mixed race Herero and German. Her father was German. And her mother just dropped her when she was a baby, just born, at the clinic in Calamari. And then this Afrikaans family, a much, much older couple, adopted her and raised her. And so I never told her that I was dedicating the book to her, but I often thought about her when I was writing it. She's a good friend. We've been friends for 30 years. And so when I told her, she was so touched. I mean, that was also beautiful for me. I mean, there's been many instances. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Touching people with what you produce must be really gratifying. It makes the effort worthwhile.
100%. 100%. I mean, it's like this. I love the writing, and I love the other side when you meet readers who really love your things that you've done. Yeah. Those are the wonderful things about writing.
And talking about writing, what advice would you give to listeners who are looking to get into writing, or who have manuscripts out there and they're looking to get it published?
You know, for writing, I mean, a lot of times people tell you, you know, oh, that story's already been told, or you won't be able to write anything new. But one thing every writer needs to keep in their heart is that every single one of us have a unique way of telling a story. Like this is one thing, you know, I told you I'm in a playback theater group where it's like an improv group where we listen to someone's story and play it back for them. It's a way of developing empathy. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And what you find there also is that there's just a million ways to tell a story. And every way is so interesting. The very same story. Like I often love books that do that, where like there's a book I love, Chain of Voices, by Andre Brink. And that one is like the same event, and this happens in other books also, the same event will be told by different characters. And that's how and it will be different,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, first of all, you should value your voice. You'll send things to a publisher, they're like, no, 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 this is not good. And like me, I get a lot of like, your sentences are so simple and they're not so, and I've tried to do all like Ben Okri, put a lot of stuff. And then when I go back for edits, I have to delete it because it doesn't belong there. So you must really just write your story and know that whatever you're telling, you're the only one in the 8 billion people that live on this planet that can tell that story in that way. You're the only one,
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to kind of stand up for yourself. I mean, of course, we must improve with our writing, we must take criticism, but hold strong to the fact that you have your way of telling a story, and that is why you are there writing. For sending out, one thing that I do, because rejection is ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and you're going to get a lot of it, and I got a lot of it. But I think one thing you can do, like I have a lot of short stories that have been published all over, and I keep sending them out. I have a few unpublished novels, so I think it's good to have a few things out there into submission land, so that if you get a rejection, you can be like, okay, anyway, I still have this other novel, or I still have this short story. So every once in a while, you'll get a bit of good news, which will motivate you to keep going. And also, when you do get a rejection, there's a million reasons why you get rejections. They might have published a book similar to yours recently. The person who's reading it is just not in the mood. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with the quality of your writing. So, me, when I get a rejection, even if I know they're like, this is bad, we don't want to publish it, and they might even say it, I'll just say in my heart, okay, it wasn't the right time for them, or something. I'll just lie to myself a little bit. So, because you really, you must just do what you have to do to get through, because rejection is part of it. Yeah. If you want to write, you should write. Even if you don't get published, there's so much to be gained. At least for me, the way I understand the world is through my writing. Like I'll think I know something, but when I write it, then I know what I know. So even if you never get published, writing is so important. If it's what you want to do, you must do it. You mustn't care. And also there's so many ways to be a writer. Like, everybody thinks you have to get an agent, you have to get a big publishing deal, you have to be in America and UK. But I know writers who have had that, and it happened and then it disappeared, where like me, because I'm sort of a generalist, I've written for TV, I've read kids books, my books are used in schools here, even in UK. I have 8 books in a series there at Cambridge University Press that are used in schools all over the world. So you can be a writer in so many ways. It doesn't have to be that one, get an agent, get published in the New Yorker, be a big thing, have an auction. It doesn't have to be that way. There's many ways to do it. And they're all valid, and they all work.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that there are options and you don't have to stick to a certain way of writing. I, for once, am quite glad that you've kept your voice and haven't gone the Ben Okri way, because I think I may have struggled with the book had you gone Ben Okri style.
Yeah, it might have been even harder to read.
Yes. Your books, I know you've mentioned that they're used in schools and they're all over the place. But if listeners wanted to buy your novels, where would we be able to buy them?
That's a good question. I mean, you can find them on Amazon, but then, we have such a distribution problem in Africa, because you'll find if somebody in UK wants to buy a book that's published in Southern Africa, it might be like £200 or some ridiculous amount of money just to get it to. So, yeah, you can find my books on Amazon occasionally and other kind of online websites. My publishers sometimes in Southern Africa will send, because most of my books are published in Southern Africa. There's the German edition, and then I have children's books that side.
Are there no digital versions that people can just download on Kindle, for example? Or if they're not, do you have any plans to digitize them?
There are ebooks on Amazon, I think. But again, there can be sort of, I don't know that much about it, but something to do with like rights. Like the ebook will be there and you'll try to buy it and it won't get in. They'll say no. You can't buy it in your place. I think they'll do an ebook edition that can be available to people in Europe, because I know my publisher in Namibia is a very small publisher and they have not been able to do an ebook. Penguin used to have an ebook, but now Penguin, the time is up for Penguin. I got the rights back and that's why I sold to Namibia and to UK.
Okay. Hopefully there will be an ebook so that more people have access to it. It's been such a great pleasure having you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, indeed, it's been good fun speaking with you, and I know technology has kind of got in the way of it, but we got there in the end. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Lauri. Thank you very much for joining.
Yes, thank you, Jacqueline. It was great.
And thank you so much for listening to the Book and Lounge podcast. Until next time, goodbye.